A futuristic Kamigawa set, Warhammer 40k commander decks, and a Lord of the Rings core set are among some of the predictions that I have for what's upcoming in Magic the Gathering for 2022.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The Magic Historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, I hope the day finds you well. We are here to speculate, to talk about my predictions for what we can expect to see from Magic the Gathering in 2022. Now, some of the information we're going to go over was provided by Wizards of the Coast without a timeline. These are products we know they are going to make. And some of this is information that's kind of been ferreted out, and some of it is just complete speculation. So we'll start out with the products that I feel more confident about, and we'll end up talking about stuff that may or may not happen based on basically the past of Magic the Gathering, right? Because in recent times, Wizards of the Coast has really ratcheted up the number of products that are coming. So I'm not predicting everything that's coming. I'm just going to talk about some of the things that we are very, very likely to see, along with an idea that is maybe a little bit kind of out there, but there's potential for as well. So, with all that being said, normally what happens is Wizards of the Coast makes an announcement about the timeline for the next year near the end of the previous year. So, we're going to be getting that announcement within about 2 weeks, where Wizards of the Coast is going to tell us exactly what we can expect to be showing up. Not every single product that'll show up for 2022, because they do like to do little announcements here or there, but we will get like the main standard releases with maybe a couple of other things tucked in there as well. So I'm going to present them in roughly the order that I expect to be seeing them. So the first thing that I'm expecting from 2022 is actually a futuristic Kamigawa set, Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. Now, this information comes from a couple of sources. One is a survey that Wizards of the Coast did asking people how they would feel about different characters from Kamigawa and presenting them as having things like psychic abilities as opposed to genuine magic and using more futuristic gear. And the other way that this shows up is actually because Wizards of the Coast has registered the website domain for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. So when they originally did the survey, they had a number of different names that they were bouncing around, and it feels like it got firmed up. The fact that they have registered a domain name doesn't absolutely guarantee that we're going to be getting the product, but it makes it incredibly likely. Now, Kamigawa may be further out. We may be talking 2023, because Wizards of the Coast sometimes has a long period of time between when they register a domain name and when the product itself actually becomes available. So for example, the Secret Lair subscription editions that they're floating around, they registered the domains for those, I believe, about 2 years ago. So there is room for some of these predictions to actually be the year after, so bear that in mind. But I expect that most likely Kamigawa Neon Dynasty is going to be the first standard set that we're going to get in 2022. Not 100% on that, but the idea behind it is that Kamigawa is essentially 1,000 years down the road from where we last visited them. So if this actually comes to fruition, it will be the most futuristic and modern style plane that we have seen. It probably will have technology that exceeds Earth's level of technology. And admittedly for me, I tend to like Magic sets that aren't as focused on newer technologies and things like that, and are mostly focused on Magic. I know for some people, those two things are interchangeable. Some people will point at older Magic sets and go, well, look, they had tech here and there and this. There's a big difference to me between that and a world that's purely built around it. But ultimately, I'm going to reserve judgment to see what they do with it. But I am expecting this to be a divergence from what we normally expect from Magic the Gathering sets. I mean, we saw with Kaladesh that they brought in cars and helicopters and things like that. So I expect futuristic vehicles and things like that. Now, this is pure speculation based on the name, and there is the possibility that Kamigawa Neon Dynasty isn't actually going to be a full set release and is going to be some kind of side product. It may be an innovation, imagination style product that they throw around mid-year. So if Kamigawa Neon Dynasty isn't going to be the first standard release of the year, then I expect it to fall into that category where it's going to be essentially a specialized box set where it's got some stuff from Kamigawa. I'm interested to see if they're just going to purely abandon the concept from the original Kamigawa world, because that one had a theme of like the spiritual side and the regular side and the merging and battle between them. And I feel like they may just be taking the name Kamigawa and completely redoing everything. And it may have no connection whatsoever to Kamigawa and may feel more like an anime Neo Tokyo kind of vibe. So that's the first set that I'm expecting to see in the year. The second standard set I'm expecting to see is Dominaria United. Now, this only comes from domain registration, and the domain was registered months after the Kamigawa one. So for me, I look at this as they didn't really firm up the name 100%, and then they decided, okay, we've got it. We're going back to Dominaria. We're going to do Dominaria United. There were rumors previously that we were going to be heading back to Chandelar. And I think that what's actually going on is we're going to be doing the Dominaria United instead. It's theoretically possible that we could get a Dominaria and a Chandelar set in the same year, but I feel like the odds of that are incredibly low. Now, in terms of what I would expect from a Dominaria United, well, the idea, obviously, just from the name, is that Dominaria has come together as one, right? So what would cause Dominaria to all come together as one? My guess is a major threat. Like, for an example of the concept that I'm thinking of, and not specifically the concept of Dominaria, but the idea of a world uniting, think about how much strife there is on our world and inter-conflict between different societies and countries and just even between everyday neighbors, whatever it is. Humans tend to get into a lot of bickering here and there over both important and unimportant things. Now, if we were thrown into a situation where aliens existed and all of a sudden they showed up and were basically like, yo, we're going to conquer Earth, well, that would have the effect, most likely, of banding Earth together overall. Sure, there's going to be conflicts here or there, but ultimately, it's going to be something that's so big that it puts into relative position where we stand in the universe. And it's like, okay, you know what? Forget all this silly arguing on Twitter and whatever. We have to deal with this menace that threatens all of us, right? Because that's really the kind of thing I feel like it would take to weld Earth together. So, if you turn that to the fantasy concept, what would be enough to weld Dominaria together? Well, the easiest solution in my mind is to look into the past. What happened in the past that caused Dominaria to have this massive coalition to fight back? What were they fighting against? And the answer is the Phyrexians. You may remember that we've seen a number of little teasers of Phyrexianness. Now, one of the most subtle ones was in Theros. There is a Phyrexian reference in Theros specifically on one of the enchantments, and in the storyline for Theros, which we never got the full book for, we only ended up getting a number of sentences that Wizards of the Coast gave us as a summary. But what happens is Ashiok learns about the Phyrexians and planeswalks off to find them, right? So we've got that combined with the fact that we've seen Vorinclex on Kaldheim. What is Vorinclex doing there? Are they looking for pathways to different worlds? Like, what has happened? Phyrexia has taken over what used to be Mirrodin, and it's now New Phyrexia. And we may be dealing with the scenario where New Phyrexia has found Dominaria. And if you don't know why they would be looking for Dominaria, Dominaria is actually the central plane of the multiverse. It is the Nexus, Dominia Prime. It literally is like the guiding pin around which the entire multiverse exists. It is the most consequential plane in all of Magic's multiverse. So taking control of that is very important. Aside from the fact that Yawgmoth wanted to return to Dominaria, because originally Yawgmoth, the father of machines, the man who rules over Phyrexia, he was from Dominaria, right? And he wants to return to Dominaria, or he did. He's not alive anymore, right? And the new Phyrexia doesn't have any connection to the old Phyrexia, with the exception that its genesis comes from original Phyrexian oil. But there is no more Yawgmoth. New Phyrexia is about finding a new father of machines, who's most likely going to be Karn, as they essentially basically trapped Karn before and made him into at least a temporary father of machines. So most likely, in my opinion, Dominaria United is going to be a set focused around the idea of all the Dominarians coming together to fight back against the Phyrexian menace. And I have to say, I'm 100% on board for that. So to me, that's what I expect to see as the second release for the year. Now, in terms of the core set for the year, I'm expecting that to be the Lord of the Rings set. It makes sense to me from the perspective of core sets have always been sort of a weird beast for Magic the Gathering, right? You have a scenario where the core set allows them to reprint a bunch of cards from different sets in different worlds without worrying about, hey, what's this person doing on this world overall, right? You can bring in characters, legendary people, and they don't have to fit into the story of the world. You can put whatever you want into a core set. But core sets also have the problem of being somewhat bland and not having a cohesive identity. The idea behind core sets is they're supposed to be a little bit simpler for beginners to get into. And the Dungeons and Dragons set that was just released is such a core set, right? Now, admittedly, it doesn't have a lot of reprints, but that's not necessary for a core set. And the concept of core sets have changed over the years. Originally, they were entirely reprint sets and white bordered. And nowadays, clearly they're black bordered, but they had changed to the point where the core sets were half reprints, half new cards. And coming up with this new idea where basically you create a core set that is somewhat beginner-esque, but also tie it into a property that already exists to draw more people in, is actually a pretty smart move. If you look at the concept of the Dungeons and Dragons set, making it a little more beginnerish, a little more basic, works well when you're drawing new people into the game, because they're going to dip their toes into the water, specifically with the D&D set, and because it's more simplistic, it makes it easier for them to grasp. So I'm expecting that's what they're going to do with the Lord of the Rings set. We're going to get a full-sized core set based on the Lord of the Rings theme, right? Now, Lord of the Rings obviously ties together very, very well with Magic the Gathering. It's the same sort of swords and sorcery style that I am more a fan of than the futuristic stuff we were talking of before. So that fits quite well in that regard. It will draw new people into Magic who are already Lord of the Rings fans. So it seems like a natural fit as the new core set. I feel like 2022 is going to feel like a wild year in terms of the properties we're going to see, because I expect that the main Commander deck release, and by that I mean what they do is when they put out standard sets, they will include sometimes they will include a couple of Commander decks that are scaled down versions. They have a couple of new cards that didn't exist before and a few rares, but they're not as juicy as the main release Commander decks, and they're sold at a lower price point, and they usually only make like 2 of them. For the main Commander release set of the year, they tend to do 4 or 5 different decks. They tend to have a lot more rares, be a lot more juicy, and also come with a higher price tag. That's what I expect the Warhammer 40k Commander decks will be. They will be the main release, and they will have 4 or 5 different ones, so they can pick a number of Warhammer 40k factions, right? Do you want Space Marines? Do you want Space Wolves? Are we talking about Tyranids, Necrons? Like, how exactly are they going to do this? Servants of the Chaos Gods, Plague Marines? There's a lot of options. So I expect that there are going to be a good number of these commander decks, most likely 4 to 5, and I do expect it to be the main commander release for the year. But who knows? They might step it up and do multiple main commander releases, because anything is possible in this day and age with the amount of products that Wizards of the Coast makes. Now, those are the products that I feel like fairly confident will be showing up. Now, when it comes to the Summer Innovation set, I'm not 100% sure what they're going to do. I'm not expecting Modern Horizons 3 to show up until 2023. So I'm not expecting a Modern Horizons 3 next year. But what I am thinking they're probably going to do is another remaster set. They're looking at ways to extract money from older properties that they've already created, but ones that can't really be used effectively to build a set around because they feel like there wasn't enough demand for that. If you don't know what I mean, Wizards of the Coast decides what worlds we're going to go back to based on how well the world's sold. It doesn't matter how cool the world is or how much people like the world. It's purely based on how much the set sold. So that's why we've been back to Zendikar a bunch of times, Ravnica a bunch of times, Innistrad a bunch of times, and why we've never returned to Kamigawa. Now we're looking at a return to Kamigawa, but so far in the future that they've changed everything about it, and it's just the name they're using. It could theoretically be any world. They could give it a brand new name, right? Like, that's the situation. So when I was thinking about remasters, I tried to think about a world that we haven't been to in a long time, that has a lot of cards to access and has a decent amount of secondary market value. And my brain keeps drifting back to the concept of Lorwyn remastered. Now, this is totally just based 100% on speculation. I don't have any kind of registered website, any kind of snippet from the product, or any word from Wizards to back it up. So it is the purest form of speculation. But I'm fully expecting there to be a remastered set in 2022. And my gut is saying Lorwyn, but that's with a big asterisk saying literally any set could be in there. So that's everything I have to say about what's coming in 2022. This is wild speculation until 2 weeks from now, where we know the truth. So let me know your thoughts. Big thank you to all my patrons. If you enjoy the work that I'm doing here, consider supporting me on Patreon. It does mean a lot. And also, as a fun little note, I released a brand new hilarious video on my other channel, and I'm going to link it here at the end. Go have a laugh on me.